Hello, and welcome to this week's look at film and television stunts. And you join us at, well, we're in the TV section. We've been in TV for a little while. All right, we did a fortnight's worth, and we kind of moved about a little bit and went to Rambo last week, First Blood. But this is going to be the last of this particular season. There's been a lot of episodes in this season. This season's been running for ages. Like, I've been pretty good normally at giving you, I don't know, a standard quantity of a season. This last one, this is season 7 that we're currently on, and we're at something like episode 26 or something. It's got slightly out of hand. So on the strength of that, and plus the fact I'm going away in about a fortnight's time or so, at the time of recording of this, so I'm going to be taking a break. I am, of course, going to be doing a location report, so it'll be quite interesting to tie up with a film that we're going to be looking at in the future. More on that to follow. This week, as you will have known from the podcast, is a television series that was big here in the UK and worked in the States as well, primarily because it had, it had an American actor in the lead alongside a British actress. So you have Michael, Brandon and Glynis Barber, who together were, and are, probably, never mind were, they are Dempsey and Makepeace. The show was originally piloted over here in 84, 85. I know the first series ran through 1985. Only ran for 3 seasons, but it was a very exciting show for me as a child. I absolutely adored it. I mean, I would stay up on a Saturday night to watch it. There was nothing else that I wanted to see. I had the theme song when that came out. I had the books. I bought that on vinyl. I had the books. They brought out some paperback books that were alongside that. And I was recording them from the TV, when they came out at the time. And anything to do with the pair of them, I was completely obsessed with. Subsequently, the chemistry you see on screen works because later on they were married. The actors, of course, were married later on and are still married to this day. It's a very successful and a lovely story. But the series itself was terrific. We'd had stuff like it before. We'd had cop dramas before. Of course we had. We'd had duo things, the good cop, bad cop stuff, and the pairs, Starsky and Hutch, Streets of San Francisco, The Professionals. You'd had Bodie and Doyle. We'd had all of this stuff before, and television series had worked terribly well on it before as well. The Persuaders, another great example of American and English working together and the differences between the two and the other characters around. But this was the first time really that something like this had really struck home. And the audience absolutely lapped it up. In those old days, they don't do it these days, but of course back in the days when there were 4 channels here in the UK, when Dempsey and Makepeace was on, it was always in the top 10. Sunday newspaper would run the top 10 viewing figures for the week. Always soaps at the top, Coronation Street's, EastEnders, Emmerdale, that sort of thing, and then underneath that you would have those big shows. Casualty was very big back then, and Dempsey and Makepeace, week on, week on, week on. It has made no difference at all. It was always in the top 10. It was always a very successful show, and consequently it had an army of fans. People watching it in the States, I mean, you would have seen it in the States. It was shown over there. I'm trying to remember what side it was on. NBC, maybe. I know that both of the lead actors went over and did publicity on Johnny Carson and David Letterman shows subsequently. But for me, it was the great story between the two. They were well done. They were well directed. And the action was fabulous. And again, it falls on that man that we keep going back to when we refer to certain movies and when we refer to certain television series. ROY ALON was a genius when it came to creating big budget action on what was then lovingly referred to as a TV budget. There isn't such a thing as a TV budget now. Throw a stick, you'll see 35, 40 shows on Netflix who cost probably more than a top drawer blockbuster at the multiplex. They're equally as complicated to make. A lot of that now is down to, of course, the CGI and the added extraordinary effects that go hand in hand with all of this. But back then, in 1985, everything was done for real. There's a moment in this sequence where we will look at a wire gag. It's very rare, but it was a wire gag, and we're going to highlight some of the stuff here. But most importantly, and it is ROY ALON was completely overwhelmed by this show. I think originally I'd had many a conversation with him in the past where he said this was just one of his favourite jobs ever. He was surrounded by terrific people. He could bring in whoever he wanted, and also when he made that phone call to people, back in the old days of phoning people, when he made that phone call, whatever people were on, unless they were really seriously committed and overseas and couldn't make it back, they go, yeah, sure, we'll come, Roy. No problem at all. I'll do a day for you, or I'll do this, or what do you need me to do? It was even a case of simply just turning up and being a face. That was enough. There were performers out there who realised that this show was important in the cop drama genre, and was going to have the legs where people like you and me are discussing it 40 years later. It was absolutely top drawer stuff back then. The action was fabulous, and Roy did, as I say, through the kitchen sink at it. That was his motto. His motto was, let's create feature film stuff on a TV budget. And he did. That we're going to have a look at some gags here that wouldn't be out of place in a movie. Wouldn't be out of place in a movie. There are movies that had been made subsequently that really lacked that extra punch and piece of action that Roy could have provided. If Roy had been on the... And, doesn't matter where you are, whether you see a movie and you go, that car, if it just had have done this... Roy was already ahead of the game and was thinking, I know what I'll do. I'll do this, and then we can do that. He was already pushing the boundaries. The words on the script, on the page, on that scene 189, car veers left, goes around stationary vehicle and slides into street. In Roy's head, he saw multiple camera angles, he saw a number of different setups. More importantly, he saw a number of incredible ways to get that car to go from A to B with oncoming traffic, for you to be right on the very front of that vehicle going as the car approaches the turn. He was way ahead of all of that. And his magic, if you will, has rubbed off on many performers then who are now stunt coordinators or now second unit directors, and they do exactly the same thing. They go back to that dark part of their brain that says, I remember when Roy did this and he was telling me about how he would do this. That's what I'm going to do with this sequence here. The words on the page are one thing. If you're the stunt coordinator of a production and the director says, look, here's the thing, you can go to him as a capacity as head of department and say, look, I reckon that we can do this if we do X, Y, and Z. Let's move that to here. Let's bring that into... And you explained it out. And in your head, you have this picture of how you can make that scene better. That's what Roy was doing continually through that series. So there's a number of gags we're going to look at here which may look relatively simple, but they've been thought through in a very special way, allowing the performer, whoever's performing the gag, and Roy to then go to the director of the overall show or second unit, which this was one of those early days of British second unit work, because they'd have two units running at the same time in certain cases. The actors would be doing their bits and pieces over this particular location, another location over here. The action team would be together and they'd be creating all the bits and pieces. So this is very early on in the development of television second unit. Not a lot of shows had done that up to that point. Now it's almost commonplace. Either the entire unit or a splinter unit, which would be the action team. So it's a very, very important, it's a linchpin moment in action-adventure drama for television, with respect to Glynis Barber and Michael Brandon, who I adore, and a project that I've been trying to work on for some time, which is going to happen. It's just taking a little longer to do. But they have been very, very good in allowing me some of their time, and they've been very helpful in providing me with some wonderful bits and pieces, and of course a very important forward to the book that I am working on. So but Roy, with respect to the two leads, Roy was the star of the show for me, and I wonder then, as I wonder now, is that if he wasn't the stunt coordinator on the show, would it have had the same effect? It's an extraordinary question to ask, but he was such a remarkable character that I really wonder. I wonder if that was the case. But for now, if you haven't seen the show, maybe this will be a way of you being able to go, well, I quite fancy having a look at that. Many episodes are available on YouTube. There are DVDs. Somebody will tell me if there's a Blu-ray box set. I don't know. I own the DVD box set. I don't own the Blu-ray set. Maybe somebody will remind me of that. I don't think there's anything extra on it either, which is a great shame. I know that when the DVD box set came out, I think there were interviews, certainly with Michael and Glynis. So it's not everything. It's not everything from the show. I'm not just going to put every single action sequence together, but stuff that has stuck with me, most certainly, to give you a flavour of it. If you haven't seen the show, go and see it. It's huge fun. And let's remind ourselves of how fabulous ROY ALON and his stunt team were as we look at this little lot. So, Dempsey and Makepeace. This is from the pilot episode, Armed and Extremely Dangerous. They're trying to catch the truck here. Elaine Ford is driving the truck. Doubling Michael Brandon is Colin Skeeping. Now he's got to make the transfer from this truck to there. This is a disused piece of road. In point of fact, this is a test centre. Later on, they use a newly developed stretch of the M4, which was being developed at the time. He's on top. Now, there's a change here inside Greg Powell and Richard Hammett. He makes his way along the top. The bridge comes up, and it's Val Mazzetti. It's not Colin. Maybe it was a separate day, I don't know. That's then Colin hanging on the back. So they must have added that separate section there. He climbs his way back up. I suspect that this particular section here is anything you see Michael Brandon on will have fans blowing in his face to create breeze. And Colin makes his way along to the top. He's now got to jump down onto the cab, which he does now. Hup, bang, they react inside. Greg shouts, "Give me the gun! Give me the gun!" And he gets knocked out. Foot trapped underneath. Now this section, when you look at it, when there's a split, Rich decides he's leaving. There we go, out the side door. So this section here, that is the unfinished section of the M4. They were allowed to use that for the purpose of the filming. Colin is on the outside of the vehicle, crashing through there. And then again here he jumps and the vehicle slides down the bank to a fiery end. Good way to start that. Good explosions. Look, that's where the money's gone. There's budget all over that shot there. Look, sensational. You do love a nice slow-mo explosion. You can't beat it, can you? Now, moving on from that, again, this is another season 1 moment. Jumping out of the window is Tip Tipping. God bless him. Sadly no longer with us. Jumping into a brown Cortina, as you used to do back in those days. Obviously left the keys in because there was no fumbling about in the pockets to get that started. And our 2 heroes chase. Tip driving around, desperately trying to outrun these pair. He's not got a chance, really. Look at that. That's a 500 Mercedes. Turns and then catches the back end of the other car, the other side of the road, up over. I think that was his first car turnover, if I'm not mistaken. Here's another example. This time Roy is in the action. I'll explain that in a moment. And again, this is a Steadicam shot, and on the back of that vehicle there is ROY ALON is the pilot, and Chris Webb's on the back firing the machine gun. And doubling our 2 heroes. Luckily, everybody's a terrible shot in this series. Colin Skeeping on the front, Tracy Edden on the back. Land very heavily. And then they come towards them. Colin lets off a couple of blasts from the 357 and down the boys go. This one, little fight on a stairwell. Nick Hobbs is now going to receive the sharp end of Harriet Makepeace's... actually, it was his knife, to be fair with you, but he gets it in the guts there, look. Chasing a furniture van, as they assume. In the back of the furniture van is a white van. The van is being driven by Greg Powell. He drives down, then handbrake turns it very stylishly, causing the Rover, good-looking Rover that as well, to crash into that vehicle there. Out of the back, the 2 gunmen get out. 2 gunmen are Romo Guerrera and Chris Webb. And as is the case with most of these series throughout the 80s, you couldn't hit, look, Romo and Chris, you couldn't hit a horse's arse with a barn door. Look, they've got machine guns blazing away, holes everywhere. Harriet Makepeace, on the other hand, is a dab hand with the service revolver. This girl gets into a car. Dempsey's in the boot. I might add this, or the trunk if you're watching overseas. One shot. Bang, there's the boot gone, so that's open. Hits again. Bang, hits her in the back. Now, this locked off shot here, you can see that the window at the back is cracked. She's reaching in to go, Jesus, I think I've been hit. Brings her hand up, blood everywhere. Oh my God. Panic sets in, loses consciousness. Car starts now to drift about all over the place. In the back of the car, of course, Dempsey needs to get out, but she's fired the gun, she's blown the lock clear out, and now he gets an opportunity to get sprung free, and Steve Wymant jumps out of the back of the vehicle. And the car itself, presumably driven by Roy, ends up in the drink. Here, perfect example of why Val Mazzetti was the best double for Michael Brandon. This is Michael Brandon, this is Val Mazzetti. Look, straight into camera, and will continue to come into camera. Straight into camera. There's the motorbike jump, and again into camera. And again into camera. I mean, it's just marvellous. He absolutely is the spitting image. These pair were sensational. Little wheelie, and Del Baker is doubling the actor there, who gets cuffed by Val. Big car chases going on throughout the series. This is another great example. I think this is the episode called Wheelman. Dempsey in an American vehicle trying to outrun some police vehicles. He's trying to gain the attention of some local hoodlums who require his services as a getaway driver. It gives Val, of course, ex-racing driver, so knows a thing or two about throwing cars about. Roy knows a thing about throwing cars about as well. Brings in some top brass to start driving the other vehicles, just for health and safety reasons primarily. You want somebody in the vehicle who knows exactly what they're doing. And this is no exception. Roy's very good behind the wheel of a vehicle. But it needs to be something else. Here, the unmistakable profile of Peter Braham, glasses on. Pete Braham knows a thing about vehicles. And him and Roy had done loads of bits and pieces together, so it would have been nice to get a phone call from Roy to say, come down and give us a hand with this, would you? This sequence here. This made the titles, I believe, in the second season. 2 police cars bearing down on Dempsey's car, and then they get to a point where they can't go any further. Chicken. Shum, and they split. Look at that. Then there's this peculiar moment. This car was creeping along and then takes off like a startled cat. Gets round the other side. Dempsey simply reverses out of the way, and the police car, driven by Roy, nowhere else to go but off the edge. It's a fair... If you close up on that, you can see he's got a helmet on it, but bang! Heavy landing. Doors off. Boots open. Whole thing's falling apart. Standard British engineering. God, they were good police. They were good-looking police cars, those. Loved them. Now, he's in the crosshairs. Oh, drops the paper. Bang! Lex Malloy. Stuntman Lex Malloy gets one in the head. Look at that. He's a motorcycle man, traditionally. Speedway. Here, now that is ROY ALON. And he's hanging on to Sadie Eden. There's a wire there, you see. She's got a knife in her hand, doubling Susie Quattro. Let's go. And there you see the cable. There's a safety cable. There's a wire. Not quite sure why they left it in shot. But, I mean, of course, back in those days, you couldn't CG them out. That's the only issue. Here's another episode. Bit of gunplay, bank robbery going on. This, Stuart St. Paul, just about to get a beating. Bosh, have that. And the guy trying to run away, stuntman Dave Brandon. When in doubt, employ them as an actor. Makepeace is playing a traffic warden. He goes, where am I going to go now? Oh no, I'll run away. And she's going to run after him. Now, the idea of this sequence, of course, is that the uniform that she's wearing is somewhat constricting. That's Dempsey's argument, anyway. Kick, down goes the gun. He runs onto the gantry. There's some scaffolding work. Lots of crowds in the background watching what's going on. When this started filming, people were really excited to see what was going on. Runs out onto a gantry. Sheena has to show some prowess here, so gets a little bit of martial arts. Kick, bang, whack, down onto the floor. He gets back up, picks up an iron bar, and bosh, clobbers a one, and Elaine Ford does the rest of it. Off the top, onto the car bonnet, Ford Sierra, by the way, and down onto the floor. Dempsey arrives at the last minute and kicks him in the face. Bosh, have that. This is fabulous. I was always under the impression that this was Val Mazzetti. It's not. It is Simon Crane. Simon Crane makes the transfer and then does the doubling on the roof. I know this because he told me. So he does all the doubling on the roof. Again, I'm not entirely certain where this was. I think it's another stretch of M4 or a newer stretch of M4. They used a lot of it in that area. So goggles off, helmet off. Now he's running across the top. I've edited this down a bit simply for pace, really. It becomes apparent that there's definitely somebody on the roof. Everybody inside the bus, hijacked bus, realizes what's going on. And again, moving along the top of the bus. Simon was very pleased that Roy had given him a shout and said, do you want to do this? This is nice. Good stuff here. And then takes fire with the shotgun. Bang! That causes the van to come to a stop. And then out of the back comes this. Trevor Steadman arrives like, look at that. see that again. Slow-mo into the stationary vehicle and over the top of the bike. That's magnificent. Oh my goodness, that's brilliant. I've watched that hundreds of times. It still gets the heart beating faster. That's brilliant. And again, confirmed by Simon Crane, who was there on the day. So no fear as far as that's concerned. That's magnificent. There's Wayne Michaels. He's about to get shot, as is his job as one of the stuntmen. Good sequence this as well. Lot going on. Whole bunch of cars out here. Everybody's trying to get away from everybody. I think that's the basis here. The rest of SI10 will turn up in the moment. The cavalry is going to turn up. What's that, a BMW, is it? Yeah, it's a Beamer. There's another vehicle there. Everybody trying to get away from everybody else. A couple of faces to pick out as I'm going along here as well. That's Val Mazzetti, now on the other side for a change. Gets shot. Here's the cavalry. This car now spinning around the place and trying to find a way out. There's Wayne getting shot. That is Gerard Napruce. Now, I've told him and sent him this picture, and he says it wasn't him. It's very clearly him. If somebody, members of his family, could confirm it's him, I'd be thrilled. This is Roy doing a cannon roll. Look at this. Cannon fired there. Over it goes. And then this one tail ends its way into... I don't know if there's a pipe on the end of that. You can't see it, but the car rises up and lands on top. Turns itself over. Another big explosion. This one, this is an interesting thing. Actor's very clearly got a beard. Gunshot. Stuntman Billy Horrigan doesn't have a beard. And falls into the water. Or into padding, as it may be. And then this second sequence, leading on from this same episode, he says, freeze it! And the guy runs off. And, never mind, it goes and runs after him. This is Val Mazzetti jumping, and he's going to land on Roy Alon. Once again, when in doubt, bring Roy in. And he knocks him to the floor, then they switch. Roy's still on the floor, it's just... Now, Terry Forrestal doing a high fall. Here he goes, little balaclava on. Lovely fall. Look, way bosh, perfect. And then he turns up again, same scene, just a moment later, hanging on to Makepeace. Wonderful world, showbiz. Chris Webb turns up as well, so he's going to be used quite a bit in a moment. Small team, so everybody doing as much as they possibly can. They're going to come up with another stuntman in just a moment. So that guy's out for the count. He runs away. And Dempsey goes after the other guy. Coming up the stairs is Gareth Milne. He gets a chest full of size 9. Have that. Val then jumps over the railing. Down the other side lands. Goes down again. Manages to cut him off. There's a little bit of a confrontation with a handily placed shovel. Doesn't make the slightest bit of difference. Look, swing, grabs hold, throws him over the edge, and it's Chris Webb once again doing the high fall into the water. That's a good fall as well, look. All of that would have been checked beforehand. You wouldn't want anything untoward to land on there, would you? Now then, who remembers Lyman? Well, this is him turning up here. They're going to rob that van, and Dempsey's going to try and cut them off. He jumps into the vehicle, and the chase ensues. Val Mazzetti once again behind the wheel of the Mercedes. Driving the red car is Jim Dowdle. He's going to perform a cracking gag in just a moment. There's a little bit of... this is quite nice as well. Hadn't seen as much of this. Again, everybody's a terrible shot, but that's half the fun of it. I believe that doubling the character Lyman is Sean McCabe. That's my belief as he dives out of the car. And then Jim arrives. Look, there's the pipe. Right up the middle of the bush. Up, over. Wow. You don't see that very often, do you? Convertibles. Doing big car rolls like that. That's not bad going. And off he goes. Another big explosion. They love their explosions in these shows, didn't they? Now then, here, classic Jerry Crampton as a prize fighter, beating 7 bells of 7 bells out of Greg Powell, who's giving his own version of 7 bells out of there as well. This is the prize fighting episode. Throwing haymakers at each other, left, right and centre, kicks, punches, you name it. Ooh, dear, another one. Now, later on, of course, Georgie Cooper then jumps in and is the opponent, has a few lines. He's going to carry him for a round and knock him out, yeah, that sort of thing. George, a very capable guy. Punch lands on these two fellas here, who throw him back into the ring. Get in there! And on the left-hand side is ROY ALON himself. Oh dear, it's a right old punch-up. Here being spun around like a record baby is Terry Plummer, who's about to get thrown by Clive Mantle, bosh, straight into the table. This ruckus has caused PC's Wayne Michaels and Simon Crane to come into the pub and go, now look here lads, right, I'll go first. Wayne dives in, gets picked up and chucked, and then Simon has the old spinny round routine and he gets chucked as well. Ooh, struth. This is a remarkable knockdown. Dorothy Ford, watch what happens here. This whole jumping to get onto the bonnet thing we talked about before doesn't get a chance. First thing hits the car, her head. Quite seriously injured she was too. Ambulances turned up and they had to treat her for this. And really quite a remarkable knockdown. She's done very well to have a few stitches in that, to be honest with you. It could have been much, much worse. But nevertheless, another Terry Forrestal moment here. Look, on the edge of scaffolding, having a fight. There goes the hat. That's to signify the height. Flick, kick, and then Terry dives in and does the rest. Lovely fall too. Super. Pretty textbook stuff, really. Greg Powell falling down a flight of stairs. It's a small flight. And he's, as he said himself, I'm not built for falling downstairs, but particularly short flights. Here is Steve Emerson. If you've seen Shaun of the Dead, you will be familiar with Steve. Steve's John, the landlord, who gets beaten with the pool cues during the Don't Stop Me Now routine. A fight on a plane, and this character is going to attempt to skyjack his way with a bunch of money. There's going to be a parachute sequence here. Now, this is 1985. We've seen the success of parachute sequences on Bond. Hadn't really got to the stage where we'd done them on television, or British television anyway. And door open. So again, all studio stuff. These two grapple, grapple, grapple. Makepeace comes over to try and hang on to Dempsey so he doesn't fall out, and they fall out. It is Rod and Stephen Bartholomew. They are the Bartholomew brothers, who were working in conjunction with the Red Devils. Red Arrows. That would have been exciting, wouldn't it? The Red Devils. And again, you know, there is a concealed parachute. For one, I believe that Stephen is doubling Michael Brandon, so there is a concealed parachute, and it's a double rig they're using. So in this shot, obviously Michael Brandon's just hanging on to the actor. In this shot, in the long shots, there is a double rigged harness which attaches both men to each other, so they're not falling away. So it's been cleverly worked out, and I'm very grateful to Rod Bartholomew for that particular piece of information. And they arrive on the floor like that. Earlier episode, this going to be a breakout moment. With the spade running away, shovel running away, is Derek Ware. Derek Ware of Havoc fame, and the prison guard is Rocky Taylor. You remember the Italian Job? Rosa's got a problem with his differential. That's Rosa. Rocky doesn't need an introduction, of course. Grabs on to the hoist and is away, trying to escape. What happens here? He spins, Rocky grabs onto him, onto his back. Fair enough. But the edit, he's very clearly hanging onto his front, which did confuse me somewhat. But anyway, they go up, 15, 20 feet? Rocky then falls. And Rosa, get me, Italian Job fan. Rosa is then lowered to the other side of the prison, Derek. And drops down, waiting for the car to turn up. It's an inside job, you know. Gets himself into the police car and away to possible freedom, so he thinks. This is Elaine Ford getting knocked down. This is brutal. Richard Hammett is driving. Elaine Ford doubling the actress up over the top. Ooh, heavy fall. Wearing a back protector and leathers. She was a biker girl, so she had some leathers on her. And this, of course, this is marvellous. This really is good. This is from the pilot episode, you'll remember. Dempsey now running to try and get that ladder, which is hanging from the helicopter. He gets to the edge of the building, and he leaps to try and catch it. Michael Brandon, and leaping, and Paul Weston right there doing the high part of all of that. He leaps, he hangs onto the ladder. That is a free hand. There is no wire work involved here whatsoever. Cutaways to ladders. In the meantime, on the roof there will be a fight. Here's the guy comes out to have a fight with Makepeace. So 2 action sequences taking place at the same time. Paul Weston climbing the ladder, and Glynis Barber as Makepeace having a fight with this dude. Obviously, there's nothing obvious about it. She's not being overpowered by him, but there is you'd think there would be a strength difference. It's a balance issue more than anything else. He throws her down there. She looks back. He comes at her, and ROY ALON does the high part of the fall. 100 feet. It's majestic. Movement, tuck, bang. Fabulous. So there you go. That was Dempsey and Makepeace. There are some terrific moments in that show. There really are. And that high fall, that's still as good as anything that I've seen for a long, long time. People don't do that anymore. Terry Forrestal, kind of almost cornered the market as far as high falls were concerned. These boys were not in a position, they certainly didn't turn down work. If they were in a position where they could do the job, they would do it. But 9 times out of 10, they were able to do it. They may have to farm it out elsewhere if that was the case. But high falls were very special, particularly on television shows. That high fall from the pilot episode, the one that's, they're all filmed in slow-mo, or they're edited in slow-mo, but it's glorious. You look at the movement that Roy is doing in the air, and he's doing that. Why? Because he's trying to maintain his body position, because there's a breeze up there. It might not be strong enough to affect his body position, but from a trajectory point of view, this is where the physics comes in. From a trajectory point of view, he is now traveling at nearly 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. And his speed is increasing before he gets to the airbag. And he's only allowed himself certain moments to adjust during that fall. You don't rehearse a fall of that size, because the fee, and again, it's not about money, but this is a factor which may explain it. You can rehearse up to the point of the gag, but you wouldn't rehearse a fall of that nature. Certainly from 100 feet you wouldn't, you wouldn't be doing back then. If there's a wire job now, and maybe a large proportion of that might have been wire if they had done it now, that would have been rehearsed, because the mechanics of the entire sequence would need to be tested and tested and tested until a flaw had been found. Do you see what I mean? But if Roy was to say, right, I'm going to test this fall from the full height, by the time the take came along, the difficulty of that fall, the danger element of that fall, had been diminished slightly because he's already done it. And therefore, if there was a problem, a fee that would have been required, whatever that fee would have been back then for falling 100 feet, could have been reduced as well. So there's a number of factors to take into consideration. Roy was also very clever, because what he used to do on a number of occasions, I know he did this on an episode of Taggart, but he may have done it on Dempsey and Makepeace as well, is that he would take the producer up to the takeoff point wherever he was going from, and he would ask the producer to look down, and then would say to him, so how much do you reckon this fall's worth now, eh? For the producer to then get a flop sweat and go, whatever you want, Roy, it's fine, and then try and get off the building as quickly as possible down the escape stairs. So he was very clever in that respect. Roy was a very, very clever man, a very funny man. I miss him terribly. He passed away in 2006, and he was a very, very funny man to be around, a lovely guy to be around, incredibly knowledgeable about most things, but really had because he was an engineer, he had an engineering background. And because, I was kind of interested in the science of the whole thing, I didn't care about, which a lot of journalists or magazines or something of that nature, if they were interviewing anybody who was connected with a movie back then, they would often say, oh, you got any gossip about the star, and how much money do you earn? It didn't bother me in the slightest. I wanted to know, how important was how much air needed to be in the airbag if you were doing a fall from this height, and how much poundage do you put in the air rams, and the pipe. Show me that thing on the end of the pipe. What's that? And he'd tell me it was a kicker and how it was designed. And, you should go and speak to Bickers. Oh, Bickers, right. So and I was just fascinated by the entire thing. It was an absolute joy to be around him. He was full of remarkable stories that he would, that he would trawl out quite happily, and had some terrific stories about films and all sorts of bits and pieces. And played the keyboard not as well as he'd like, if the truth be honest. But he was very game, and it didn't matter where he was in the world. If his phone rang and it was you on the end of it, he'd go, "Hello, Flower, how are you?" He called everybody Flower, primarily because he would forget many people's names. This was, I think, possibly long before the days of being able to put somebody's name into a mobile phone. Hello, hey up, Flower. And he would be very gracious, and then he would say, which is what happened almost the last time I spoke to him. I'd ring him up once a week, a couple of times a month, and hello, Flower, how are you? I'm all right, Roy. How are you doing? Oh yeah, not so bad, not so. What can I do for you? Oh, well, I just wanted to ask. I'm doing a piece about Pink Panther. Let's say, for example, I'm doing a piece about Curse of the Pink Panther. And you, of course, were involved in the opening sequence, doubling Herbert Lom. Yes, that's right. I wanted to know about how you designed the fish wire, the cabling that would keep you safe and away from the wheelchair. He tethered it so it wouldn't hit him when he hit the water. And he said, "Can I call you back, Flower? Because I'm in India." I go, "What? What do you mean you're in India? You never mentioned it." So he wouldn't mention it at the top of the call. He'd let me explain to him first so that he was fully aware of what I wanted, and then would be aware that, it's not a problem. He'll hang on, I'm in India, Flower. Can I call? We're on a different time zone here, so let me just finish getting some sleep, and I'll contact you a bit later on. Roy, I'm really sorry. I apologise. I didn't realise. No, you weren't to know. Don't panic, Flower. I'll call you later. And he would call me later, and we'd go through the whole thing, and he'd explain about the whole thing. Nothing fazed him. Nothing fazed him at all. He was a remarkable man. And as I say, I miss him terribly. And he was very, very kind to me very early on. Showed me how to ride a horse. Showed me how to unsuccessfully fall off a horse. And how to... how to injure myself. That wasn't his fault. And he did feel terrible, but it wasn't his problem. That was very, very clearly my problem. I was lucky enough to do falls with him. You know, I'd done a couple of falls with him. I did 60 feet I'd done with Roy, which was do a stunt with a stuntman. We did a duo fall 60 feet into an airbag, and then he let me go on my own, which was, you know, to learn how to fall from a guy who was predominantly known as a high faller was very exciting. And so when I watch him subsequently in films or television like Dempsey and Makepeace, Green Ice is another absolutely wondrous high fall. It's the arm movements, it's his body positioning, it's his leg movements. Watch, and everything's slowed down, and the if it's a full picture, it might just go in just a touch and just focus on him just that little bit more, and you watch him moving and you think, now I know why he's doing what he's doing. Because I've asked him, because I've watched him, because I've done that. You know, you can go with him, and I know why you're doing this. There's a slight crosswind, but it's not enough to affect your landing area. But you just want to make absolutely certain that you are going to tuck at just the right moment to flip over onto your back and land flat. So he was very, very precise. He was like a surgeon. It's a very infinitesimal thing, but he was very, very specific about those type of things, and I found him absolutely fascinating, and I hope that once you have seen this, it'll make you go, do you know what, I kind of seen a couple of episodes of this, but I'd quite like to see more of it. And if that's the case, then my work here is done, and it's been a great thrill to be able to go through these clips and highlight all the best stuff that's been going on. Maybe explain a bit more about what's going on as well. So I hope you have enjoyed that. That's season 7 then, folks. When I come back, I might do there's going to be a couple of bits and pieces before Christmas, right? And then I'm hoping that the book will be, and again, it's out of my hands at the moment. I only wrote the damn thing. I wrote it. My team, a wonderful team of guys who put it together, and they've designed it, and they've done X, Y, and Z, and all the other bits and pieces. But there's a big flag that says copyright, and I'm fully aware that I've done my absolute best to avoid it completely. But it needs to be confirmed at the highest level, and so what I'm having to do with the Bond stuff at the moment is just kind of like sit and wait. I can't do any more. I wanted it out for the 60th anniversary, and sadly that hasn't happened, but hopefully it will be this year. I want it out before the end of the year, and we are pushing very, very strongly to get that done, and hopefully it's a case of simply somebody getting their act together and going, right, that's it, we'll sign off on this, go and do it. And as soon as I do that, then it'll be all over the place. You won't be able to, well, you can't keep a good man down, you know. So I hope you've enjoyed that. That's season 7. We'll come back with season 8 probably in the new year. Leading up to that, there'll be a few bits and pieces over the Christmas period. And until then, bye for now.